Oh, listen to Cowherd on this. I found this compelling. You tell me, you find this compelling or not? I know he's one of the national hosts. Well, oh gosh, the national blowhards, they don't know what's going on. Sometimes in games like this, I like to kind of get the pulse of what's going on outside the two cities because the two cities were all emotionally wrapped up. Take the emotion out of it. Okay, Colin.
Eagles are 10-1, best team in the league situationally, great roster, got to the Super Bowl last year. They are so good in close games. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it, right? But is there a downside to that? Oh, there is. We went back 7 years, Super Bowl champs, 10-plus point wins. You see, teams that win the Super Bowl flex. They blow out teams. Now, you know that in college, but it's true in pro football. If you go to the last 7 Super Bowl champs, Patriots had 10 wins over 10 points. Eagles, 2017, Nick Foles, 7. Patriots, 8. Chiefs, 7. Bucks, 8. Rams, 6. Chiefs, 7. If you go back a decade, there's only one exception. Denver Broncos, 2015, but that was that Brock Osweiler, old Peyton Manning circus year, right? Like they couldn't get the quarterback thing right. And that was also the best defense we've all probably seen in the last 10 years. Philly doesn't have that. In fact, in NFL history, Philadelphia has the second worst point differential for any team that's won 10 of their first 11. They don't flex because they can't flex.
Do anything for you at all?
A little bit. Yeah, it's a little arbitrary to me. And, you talk about games that you win that are 10 or more points is what he's talking about. And I'm looking at Kansas City from their Super Bowl title, and they had 7 games. 2 of them were by 10 points. So I guess those are flexes. And, to me, not every 10-point win is created equally. You can get a late field goal that ices the game and puts you up 10, or you can be up 17 and the other team can score a late touchdown to make a real blowout look different. And you talked about the Niner-Ram game from this year where, McVegas was desperate to keep that to not be a blowout game, and they lost by 7 instead of by 10 because he got some cheapy field goal with like 8 seconds left in the game. So it's a little bit arbitrary where you draw the line, but I do think what he's saying is pretty fascinating in terms of Super Bowl champs tend to be teams that don't have these nail-biter games.
All right, so who are those teams?
For the record, the 2 current teams that look like, historically, they will win a Super Bowl. Take a deep breath. Dallas and San Francisco both have 7 blowout wins. Philadelphia's got 2. Philadelphia went to overtime with Washington and was outplayed at home. They were in a competitive game with the awful Patriots. They've trailed, I think, at half last 4 games. The numbers don't lie here. College football national champions, be it Georgia or Michigan or Oregon, the 3 best teams in the country, they've got a half dozen blowouts. Cowboys, blowouts. Niners, blowouts. Last decade, everybody but the 2015 Broncos, blowouts. And again, that team had a great defense.
I'll tell you why this matters to me, because as you said, a little bit arbitrary, and I agree with you, and I actually don't think the Dallas Cowboys, while they fit this mold that he's talking about, I think there are holes in it because they have not beaten a good team this year.
You pointed this out earlier.
They've beaten 0 teams with a winning record.
I'm looking at their 7 flexes, as Colin would call them, and it's a flex on the Giants by 40. Aaron Rodgers not playing. First game without A-Rod.
Yep.
You flex on the Jets by 20. You flex on McCorkle Jones by 35 in Dallas. You flex on the Rams by 23. I don't know if Stafford played in that one. That might have been still pre-Stafford.
I don't think he did, but anyway, go ahead.
You flex on the Giants by 32. You flex on the Panthers by 23, and they didn't have a head coach. And you flex on the Commanders by 35, and they're not very good. So in terms of what Colin's saying, 7 flex wins, but those are 7 wins against the dregs.
Right, which is, by the way, not the case for the 49ers at all. And he must have only been talking about the NFC, because when I look at the AFC, the Baltimore Ravens, which is what I thought he was going to say, absolutely fit the bill. They beat the Houston Texans by 16. They beat the Cleveland Browns by 25. They beat the Detroit Lions by 32.
Yep.
They beat the Seahawks by 34.
Wow.
They beat the Cincinnati Bengals by 14 and beat the Los Angeles Chargers on the road, air quotes, by 10. So
that's 6 right there.
They've
6
got,
flexes.
yeah, they've got a bunch. And obviously right now, for my money, if you're trying to look at teams and go, okay, who really just who impresses you? Niners and Ravens. And Eagles, but to a lesser degree. I really love what the Eagles do in the fourth quarter. I don't love what they do in the first 3. Fourth matters more than the other 3, but again, they've not been a dominant team. Okay, here for me is the phrase that pays, because this is the point that I've been trying to make. The Eagles are good, and they do have a bubble, but the bubble's going to burst, because when you play this way, it will catch up to you at a certain point. I don't know if it's this Sunday, 2 Sundays from now, or not till January, but in my opinion, this catches up to you just like it caught the Vikings last year. So what happens to teams like these Eagles?
And you could say, oh, Colin, you're really reaching here. Am I? Let's go back to the last several years. Who was the best team last year in one-score games? It was the Vikings. They were 11-0. Quick exit from the playoffs. Well, what about the year before? Well, let's go to 2018, the Cowboys. 9 of 10 wins, one-score games. How did the playoffs go? They lost early. Seahawks, 2019. Remember that team? Russ cooking? 10 of 11 wins, one-score games. Seahawks out early, lost in the divisional round. History tells you how it works. College football, we've always understood it. The natty, the champions, blow people out, like half their schedule, sometimes more. But it works that way in the NFL, too. You flex. Lopsided. San Francisco going to Pittsburgh in the opener, beating them by 3 touchdowns. Dallas crushes teams.
The bubble's going to burst. And here's my parlay. Niners win this weekend by 10 and don't see the Eagles again. There's my parlay.
Yeah. The first part of the parlay, I think, is an easier play than the second part of the parlay.
Sure, maybe.
Because I do think that the Niners are going to win this game. The more I look at the rest advantage and the injury report and all of the metrics in terms of offensively, the Niners and Eagles are pretty close to each other. Defensively, the Niners have been better statistically, and I don't think that the travel is going to be that much of a factor. The Niners coming off extended rest, and if the crowd really is 1/4 Niner fans or as much as 30% or whatever the ticket resale market would indicate, it's not going to be as hostile of a crowd, and I think that the weather shouldn't be as much of a factor. So all of the things that could play against him, I don't think will, and I think the Niners will win. Now, the other part of it, that they won't then face the Eagles again, that to me is a little bit more of a long shot proposal, because the Eagles are going to make the playoffs.
Yep.
The Niners will too. And there are many different scenarios that could lead these two teams to play again.
Many. Absolutely. But I think right now there's a lot that's going to be unfold over the next 10 days. Because my prediction right now is that the Eagles will go 0-2 in the next 10 days. And that brings a whole host of possibilities into play. Let's go to the phones. 888-957-9570. We'll take your calls throughout the remainder of our hour. Todd in Concord on Willard and Dibs. Hey, Todd, what's up?
Hey, guys. Good evening.
Good evening.
I thought the equalizer for me is exactly what one of the things that Dibs was just saying, and that is just the lack of performance for the Eagles on Sunday with the Bills. The defense was just on the field way too long, and that's just what's gonna cause the problem this Sunday against the Niners. That's the equalizer.
Well, the other side to it is those defensive players. Thanks, Todd. Are they?
Todd.
Are they?
Waiting for that.
It's funny. I'm listening to Todd on the phone, and I'm looking at the Todd names, the draft analysts up there talking about Rome Odunze, the Washington wide receiver, who's one of the top 10 prospects in the NFL coming up. But yeah, like, it's not just the fatigue of the defense; it's the health of it. Fletcher Cox may not play,
right,
and he is a leader physically and emotionally for this Eagles team. Fletcher Cox being out feels a little bit like if Fred Warner were out of a football game. It's a big, big deal. So you're right. I think that there are a lot of sort of circumstantial items that point to the 49ers. I just think there's also an overall sort of like view from 10,000 feet that favors the Niners as well.
And I think, to paraphrase your thoughts and your feelings about the game, if they were on equal rest and if they were equally healthy, you still would like the Niners based on the fact that you think that they're a better team.
Yeah, they're better.
So put aside the additional factors, and I think that Todd was right in echoing my point about not only the rest advantage, but the health advantage and the recency of the game advantage, because Philadelphia had to play 4.5 quarters or more of football, high leverage football, Sunday night, tough football, even though it was at home. The Niners played a Thursday game, which, turned into a little bit of an ice skating trip to the ice skating rink in that fourth quarter. It wasn't the same sort of high leverage, pressurized environment to where they were able to get some guys some rest late in that game.
No doubt, no doubt. So all of those things factor in. Mark in Oakland is next up here on Willie and Dibby. Hi, Mark.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for taking my call.
Always.
So I got a couple just subjects that came up, some points on that, and then what I think the 49ers need to have happen this weekend if they want to win a Super Bowl. So I was thinking, Mark, you tend to be more glasses half full with the 49ers, and
Definitely.
I always push back against that.
Okay.
And I did some soul searching. They just feel, to me, and that's why I don't like getting too optimistic, like they got a little bit of Buffalo Bills 4 times to the Super Bowl, get close and can't get it done. This team, that culture, even back to Harbaugh, they keep getting close. How many NFC championships, how many Super Bowls now, 2 they've lost? They just aren't getting over the hump, and I'm worried. I guess it's fear because I'm a big fan that they're just going to be that. This era is going to be that. So I am reluctant to get optimistic, but if I try to just stay objective, and what Cowherd was saying, he's full of it, man. That
Why?
guy's totally just making a point just to say something.
No, why? Which part? What?
In the NFL, I'll explain why I'm saying that. Because in the NFL, it's not about blowouts anymore. Those things are over, like the old 49ers teams and Dallas teams. Now it's about the grinders. Look how the Patriots, they were undefeated. Who beat them? A grinder team that can win close games. And the comparison to the Vikings, yeah, if the Vikings the year before had made it to the Super Bowl, it would be a fair comparison, but the Vikings never get anywhere. They're a totally different case than the Eagles. So what the 49ers need to have happen, because I think the 49ers are sort of like those Bills teams. They look real flashy sometimes, and they can't win the big one when it's all on the line. They get shaky. What they need to have happen is this game, and it'll help them get ready for the Super Bowl. It needs to be close. It needs to rain. Purdy needs to figure it out. It needs to be shaky and grindy. And Shanahan needs to not make dumb decisions down the stretch. Purdy needs to not throw an important pick at the end when he's jittery and nervous and pull it out. That would be a start. Then they got to do it in the Super Bowl. But these blowout teams never win anymore. That's not true. I don't even know where he's coming with that.
But Mark, if you listen to what he said, the examples he cited were literally the last 7 years. That's the list he read off.
Yeah, but he was cherry picking moments. Look at who won the Super Bowl and how they won. It was grinder games. Look at the KC wins. They had to grind and barely pull it out against the 49ers. You have to be able to win those games, and the Niners and Shanahan have not shown they can do that.
Okay, that's a fair point. That's a fair point, but in my opinion, Mark, and thank you, you're discrediting the wrong thing with what Colin was just saying there. The Eagles-Chiefs game last year was not a grinder game. It was a score fest. The offenses went back and forth and absolutely torched each other. What was the final score of the game?
The Super Bowl?
Yeah.
It was a high-scoring game, yeah.
Wasn't everybody north of 30?
Yeah.
It's not a grinder. A grinder game is when the Titans are playing. A grinder game happens in the AFC North. So that has nothing to do with the point that's trying to be made here about blowouts, or as he called them, flexes. First of all, by no stretch am I saying that's the end-all, be-all. It's not. But I do find it to be an interesting point, which is that when you're really good, it tends to be a situation where you put some people away. The Eagles have been able to put away a sum total of 0 teams this year. They can't do it. So does that matter? It doesn't matter if they keep winning by 3. And I'll totally acknowledge the point that I wish that the Niners being involved in a close game in the fourth quarter were a more comfortable situation. It's not. That has not gone well. If we do see a close game in the fourth quarter, absolutely I'll be nervous because the Eagles have been way better in those situations. But you know when the Niners have been better? All the other quarters. All of them.
Yeah, they've been really good.
A better team from beginning to end most of the time because in their 8 wins, they just flat put the opponent away.
Yeah, they're great at front running, and they have not shown an ability to come back from more than 8 points down in the fourth quarter under Kyle Shanahan. So, the blueprint for Kyle Shanahan and the Niners is control the clock, get the lead, run it more than 30 times, possess the ball more, and win. That's the way Kyle has done it for the majority of his career. I do think that, Mark, to echo Mark's point about Colin Cowherd, he uses 7 years as a line to serve his point because just thinking about it and listening to you go back with Mark and talk about, the flexed victories and thinking about grinder teams, the New York Giants is a team that Mark was citing, and their 2 Super Bowl runs with Eli at the helm, they only had 4 flex wins in each season. Now, that's going more than 7 years back. That's 2011 and 2007.
And we would also agree that those, while they count, were improbable.
Correct. But I think that when you look at, any number of years, you can go back as far or as recently as you want to go back in any of these things to make your point.
Nothing's absolute.
Right.
And I don't know. No one's saying that. I just think that one of the things that I think has actually been the theme of the week here on 95.7 and for anybody who's focused on this football game, the theme of the week has been, can someone explain why the Niners are favored? Well, that's where we've arrived. I'm explaining to you why the 49ers are favored.
Right. They're better.
They're better.
Yeah, they're better. Forget the records.
Doesn't mean they're going to win.
Right.
They're better.
If you just look at how they've played and what they've done, forget the records. 10-1 is better than 8-3. We can all agree that the Eagles have a 2-game lead and they've won more games. The 2 teams have played the same number of games. They haven't played the same teams. The Eagles have won more games, but in terms of the stats and even in the eye test, yeah, the Niners are better. They're not a lot better. This is not, the Niners taking on Carolina.
Not favored by 8. They're favored
or
by 3.
14.
Yeah.
This is not a one-sided situation. This is not the Niners against Arizona or the Niners against the Rams, which are games that are still going to be coming up, and they'll be much more heavily favored in those games.
Yeah, no doubt about it.